Cool.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining for our info session on the publishing certificate for spring summer 2026 term. My name is Mashur Chaudhry, and I'm the manager of recruitment and sales for the Chang School. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the land on which Toronto Metropolitan University is built upon. Toronto is in the Dish with One Spoon territory. The Dish with One Spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. I thank the Indigenous people of Turtle Island for their efforts to protect the land and deeply regret the past injustices they have endured. As Toronto Metropolitan University seeks to move forward in partnership with Indigenous people, I pledge to foster an environment that is more inclusive and welcoming of all Indigenous peoples from all communities. Now, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's session. Your microphone is muted throughout the event so as not to disturb other attendees or the presenters. For the hearing impaired, we have automated captioning available, which you can access by activating it in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. You can submit questions for our speakers at any time by typing them into the question box of the control panel, and we will answer them after the presentation during the Q&A session. Now I'd like to introduce our panelists for today. Joining us are Kelvin Kong, Academic Coordinator of the Certificate at the Chang School, Julia Harmsworth, current student of the Certificate at the Chang School, and Lee Nash, Publisher at Assembly Press, as well as Program Advisory Lead at an instructor for the Certificate at Chang School. Now, before we invite everyone, I wanted to do a quick poll with you all just to check the temperature of the room. So we're going to use a Mentimeter poll for everyone today. If you could quickly go to menti.com and type in the code that's displayed on the screen. It's 26144478. It'll just take a couple of seconds to complete the poll, and it'll give our panelists some feedback on why you're motivated to consider this certificate. What made you consider it? And the options you see, there's career advancement, career change, skill building for current role, and we have a few personal interests, which is always great to see. And yeah, as we can see the live results coming in, I love using this tool because it allows us to engage with the audience. So thank you for participating. Career change and career advancement leading the way, and we've got skill building for current role, and like I said, a few personal interests. So we'll leave that on for just a couple of more seconds, and then we'll move on to our next poll.
I assume I'm not allowed to play.
What's that?
I assume that I'm not allowed to play this.
No, you can go ahead and play for this.
All right.
It's open to anyone with the code um, that's up there. Okay, so it looks like everybody's in. Let's go to the next one. So once again, menti.com 26144478 for anyone else that might want to join. And the next question is, what is your current level of knowledge in the field? So there is high, which is I'm well informed about the field, moderate, basic awareness about the field, and then we have low, minimal or no prior knowledge of the field. Okay, so really high number of people with moderate basic awareness of I guess publishing in general, not just a certificate. And then we've got some people in high and some people in low, which is great. So we'll leave that on for just a few more seconds, and then we're going to stop sharing the screen and start our presentation. But thank you once again, everyone, for joining, and thank you for participating in our poll that helps inform our team. Okay, Luke, so I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing. It's back to you. And now I'll invite our academic coordinator, Kelvin Kong, to go over the presentation. Welcome, Kelvin.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Shura. I am Kelvin. As Ms. Shura said, I am the academic coordinator for the program. I am also an instructor in the program for the literary rights management course, and a literary agent at my agency, K2 Literary. I'm also a former student of this program back in, back when dinosaurs still roamed the earth, aka 2004 to 5. So yeah, I'm here to talk about the program to you, give it a little introduction of the program, how it works, what the requirements are, how much things cost, and whatnot. So, without any further ado, let's move to the next slide. Great. So here's some quick facts about the program. It's a online asynchronous program. So it's a fully online asynchronous program. So when you come take our courses, all your educational material is readings based and not video lectures. So you do not actually have to be at your desk at a certain day or a certain time. You can take in the material throughout the course of the week. As for us, each class in a course takes place over a week. So, you can take in this stuff at your own pace, aside from any assessments or quizzes or exams. So we have 25 courses in the program, ranging from editing courses to sales and marketing to business, production, the whole gamut of publishing, the publishing industry. The book publishing industry is captured in the program. So, whatever path you choose, you will find something that'll be for you. Just on a side note, we are entering our 36th year in operation. We started back in, I can't do math, 1990s, I believe. So, and we've been going strong. We have a lot of people who went through our program who are now very high up in publishing. We have people who are award-winning authors, and we have people like me. I work in publishing, and so does Lee, and so does Julia. So there you go. I'm sorry. Okay, so the requirements for the certificate is 6 39-hour courses or equivalent. Um, our courses are divided into two types. We have the full credit course, which is 39 hours, aka 13 weeks, and then we have half courses, which are 19 and a half hours, 7 weeks, and we call those half credits. Those tend to be more specialized courses, whereas the full credit courses are the more general ones, like the intro, sales and marketing, and whatnot. So the requirements are you have to take 6 of these full credits. There are 2 required courses in the program, CDPB 100, which is a trade overview. So you'll learn all about trade publishing. And when I say trade publishing, I mean the publishing that, has all the stuff that you find at the bookstore, as opposed to educational publishing, which is textbooks. The second required course is CDPB 101, the business of book publishing. So, publishing is at the very end a business. So, this course will help you get the skills required to learn how to work in publishing, the business, and learn about the business aspects of it. So, once you get those 2 courses down, you have 4 electives to choose from. They can be anything you want based on what your interests lie. Um, the length of the program, you have 4 years to take the whole program, but because it's a part-time program, it's designed to be as flexible for your needs. So you have 4 years, but what we found is that students finish within 1 to 2 years for the certificate. Um, and the cost is about $5,400 to $7,000. It depends on the combination of full and half credit courses you take, but on the upper end of it will be $7,000, barring textbook costs. And I can tell you, most of our courses do not have textbooks. We use the library resources. It's mainly the editing courses where there are a lot of material to cover, where you will be expected to buy textbooks. Also, I wanted to add here that, for while this is a certificate program, we are part-time and you are free to take courses for professional development or to skill up without having to commit to the full certificate. So say you're working you're working at editing in a publishing house and you want to pick up, indexing skills or proofreading skill, you can come in and take one or two courses and be done with it. So that's also an option. Okay, next slide, please. So yeah, I just talked about this. Great. Certificate requirements. So the first thing that the most important thing is, if you do plan on completing the certificate, you should register for it. And you can do so at any time between, enrolling in your first publishing course up to before you complete 50% of the requirements. So do it before you finish have 3 credits under your belt. Um, Otherwise, what happens is anything, if you do it afterwards, anything that is more than 50% of will not count towards your certificate GPA. I do have to say that caveat, but generally speaking, real talk, most publishers don't really care about your publishing school grades. Yeah. Anyway, as I mentioned, the certificate requirements are two required 39-hour review courses and 4 elective courses. The cumulative grade point GPA is 1.67. It's pretty straightforward. The 2 courses that require CTPB 100 and 101 uh, sorry, will give you a good base for, the rest of your program. Sorry, rest of your studies. Go on, please. Okay, so industry trends. We do respond to industry trends and we do introduce courses based on market needs that we see. So, for example, recently within the past few years, we introduced CDPB 280, which is audiobook publishing and production. Audiobooks are quite popular now, and we wanted to have a course for people to meet that need in publishing. They can come in, learn how to produce an audiobook, and go out and make audiobooks. Of course, it's not that straightforward, but the aim, ideally. CDBB 285, accessible publishing and production. Another huge issue in publishing is accessibility, and being able to reach as many readers as possible. Not just through the traditional mediums of print books and ebooks, but also, you know, for those people who aren't able to use ebooks or read print books because of visual disabilities, screen readers and whatnot. So it's quite a huge thing, and it's also law in Ontario, as part of the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. So we have a course about, designing accessible books so that production people and editors can slot it into the workflow and keep it in mind as they develop a book. And CDPB 803, digital publishing and production. I mean, this one we developed quite a while ago, back when ebooks were on the rise, which was about a decade ago or so. But it is, something we created in response to industry trends. It is one of our most popular courses because it's useful for anybody who works in the production workflow. So again, editors and production people. Go on. Great. So as I mentioned, we have 25 courses, and they will give you the skills in things like copy editing, substantive editing, proofreading, indexing, and indexing recipes and cookbooks. Our school started off as very editorially oriented, and we do have probably the widest range of editing courses of the publishing schools out there. Um, for example, with copy editing, we do have 2 different copy editing courses to cover, the wide range of ground in, that is the discipline. Substantive editing, we have a course in substantive editing, but we also have a course in editing fiction as well to special notes. We also have courses in sales and marketing and publicity. Which are actually 2 courses, sales and marketing and publicity. We have the course on the business of book publishing, which is a required course. We have a course in literary rights management, which is probably the most important course in the program and the best course. And don't Please don't shake your head at me, Lee. It is true. You know this. It's also the course I teach and develop, so I'm very biased. We also have courses in children's publishing, from marketing, editing. We have courses on book production, book design, digital publishing, as I mentioned, and accessibility and audiobook production, as I mentioned. So these courses, all these parts will pretty much cover pretty much most of the gamut of the publishing house, unless you're thinking of very specific jobs like bookkeeping or warehousing, which we can't really teach in the program. But everything else, it's right there for you. Go on. So, this program does have several career path options. I think most people come in expecting to be in book publishing, but there are transferable skills that you can pick up and work in other areas. For example, in book publishing itself, a lot of the courses and we'll deal with trade publishing, but we do have educational publishing courses, and a lot of our graduates do go into educational publishing. It was much more of a popular field back in the day, but it is less so now. But there are still quite a few jobs in educational publishing. Um, there's freelance editing. You like you saw, we do have quite a few editing courses and a lot of courses a lot of freelancers do work in specialized fields such as indexing, which basically no one does in-house because it's expensive. Um, so people who work in freelance editing who are able to do indexes actually can make quite a good living from it. There's corporate publishing because like banks will need someone to do their edit their annual reports. They pay quite well. You can take the skills you learn here and work in nonprofit and government communications. You can work in magazine publishings. Though, if you want to specialize in magazine publishing, you may want to look at the Centennial program because they are the ones who are focused on it. But the skills that you learn here will stand you in good stead in magazines. So the roles that you can work in publishing are, you can see on the slides: business, editorial, sales, marketing, publicity, production and design, and rights management. Again, we have the courses to cover the whole range of what you can do in book publishing. Next slide. Learner benefits. So, we talked about what you can do here, but we also want to talk about some of the benefits you get as a student in our program. You can get career advising and professional development support from from my colleagues here at the Chang School. You'll meet industry connections, your instructors, your fellow students. You'll be in the student community. There are networking opportunities. Now, I know that, an online asynchronous course program sounds like there aren't that many networking opportunities, but we do create networking events, virtual ones, for our students. And for those of you who live in Toronto, at the end of the term, I do have a meetup where you can meet me and some of your instructors and each other. Industry connections is important, which is why we do it. For example, I got my first publishing course because my classmate in my intro class told me about an opening at her company. There's flexible learning here with a dedicated academic guidance. So as I mentioned, this is a part-time program. It's asynchronous. You do not have to be in a certain place at a certain time. It's designed for people who have other priorities, such as family care, full-time jobs. You really you take what is in one 3-hour course and you spread it out through the week, and you can take it at your own pace. You'll have full access to TMU resources and learner privileges, and you'll have access to financial support. In this case, it's merit-based financial awards and bursaries. This just to answer any questions about it. This program, because it's professional training and a non-degree credit, it is not eligible for OSAP. But we do offer a number of awards every year. Applications are open twice a year, and we give out about $7,600 in financial awards. If you want to know more about the awards and the bursaries, go to the Chang School website and just look up bursaries and you'll find them. Go on. Yeah, and that's it. If you have any questions, our brochures and my emails are down there, and we're happy to answer any questions, as well as any that are coming in about a minute or 10. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kelvin, for that insightful and lovely presentation. Next time, delighted to introduce Lee Nash. Lee's a publisher at Assembly Press, as well as the program advisory lead for the certificate here. And Lee, inviting you to say a couple of minutes.
Yeah. Hello. So I'm currently working as a publisher, which means I'm kind of sitting in the top seat overseeing a whole press and everything that happens there. I've previously served as the publisher for House of Anansi Press and Invisible Publishing. I've worked at Coach House Books and for a number of other publishers. I've taught book publishing at York University and Humber College, and I've served on boards of directors within the association or within the industry, the Association of Canadian Publishers and eBound Canada. And I just wanted to share some of that because just to show sort of the breadth of work that comes out of um, getting a publishing certificate. I started in publishing in my late 20s. I got my first job through posting at a temp agency. And I realized that I had a lot to learn starting cold. Um, my first job in trade publishing, I used to run back to my desk after meetings to Google all the acronyms. So I can say a vote for publishing school is that you will not have to do that. You'll be much more efficient and you'll have a leg up. Um, the great thing about publishing is that the skills are really transferable. I've worked in the industry and out of the industry in nonprofit healthcare as well. I've run a dog sled festival. I've had some good careers. But so much that I do every day are things that I've kind of picked up. I brought the things that I've learned from publishing into those other jobs too. My day is so eclectic. I some days I'm acquiring books, some days I'm editing them, some days I'm packing boxes. Even as the publisher, I still have to pack boxes, and I'm really good at it. It's very satisfying. I do the bookkeeping, I do help with typesetting, sales, publicity, marketing, and I can say that publishing has ruined me for just about any other job because of the sheer variety of work. I have not been bored in well over a decade. So if you hate being bored, it's very much for you. Um, it's just such a great and collegial industry too. I can't say enough good things. My work has predominantly been in the independent Canadian publishing sector. Um, and it's such a great group of people who are so supportive of each other and are willing to share knowledge. And a lot of that will come through with the instructors in this program too, who are people who are working in the industry. We're all peers and I can't say good enough things about taking that temp agency job and ending up in publishing. I'll leave it there for now.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that and for sharing your story. Those are some great careers, actually, some really fun jobs. So yeah, loved hearing that. Finally, I'm pretty pleased to introduce Julia Harmsworth. Julia is both a student of the certificate and currently serves as managing editorial coordinator at HarperCollins Publishers. Welcome, Julia.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. So, I'm going to be talking a little bit about my experience in the program and in publishing in general. So, yes, I currently work in managing editorial at Harlequin, which is an originally Canadian publisher that is under the HarperCollins umbrella. So that's cool. I get to work on like Canadian content with like some big American support, I guess, which is kind of cool. So I've been there for just over 2 years now. I spent 1 year doing an internship, and I've been full-time permanent since the start of last year of 2025. And so in managing editorial, we're really the liaison between editorial and production. So we run editorial status meetings, we manage schedules. It's our job to make sure that all the books actually make it to the printer on time. And we're also the contact for editorial and our editors if anything goes wrong or if they need anything ever. And if they want to do something new that we haven't done before, it's our job to talk to production and figure out how to make it happen. So it's a lot of problem solving and like process efficiency stuff that I find really interesting. I started in the publishing program at the Chang School in the fall of 2023. I just graduated from my undergrad in English at Queen's, and I knew that I really wanted to break into publishing. but I was really, really struggling to make any headway. So if that is you, I empathize. I know it's so difficult. So I did a lot of LinkedIn stalking and I realized that, oh, like everyone who has a job I want has a publishing certificate. And most of them have it from TMU. Maybe that's what I have to do. So I was like, okay, sure. And I signed up immediately. And very quickly after I had done one semester and I had taken some courses, suddenly I started getting some bite on my applications, and I ended up in my internship at Harlequin at HarperCollins in managing editorial in 2024. And then I kept on working through the program as I worked at Harlequin. I was working full time and doing the program, so you can totally do it if you also work full time. And it ended up taking me 3 semesters to complete while working full time. I really, really enjoyed the program overall. I absolutely did learn a lot that I use in my job every day today. Lee is so right about the acronyms. I could not believe how many acronyms they throw at you in like your first week, but I knew what most of them meant, and I like felt very smart. And people would try to explain things to me, and I was like, no, I already know this because I learned it in school. So that was really cool. And I also found it really helpful that in taking all the different courses, you get to learn about what each different department does, which is really important, especially in my role because we're kind of in between everyone. I know a little bit about what everyone else does, which helps me communicate with them and be more diplomatic. And it's just, I found that very, very helpful. So I'd encourage you really experiment with the different, if you take this program, experiment with the different courses, take different things, take something that you don't even think you want to go into. I thought I wanted to go into editorial. It's not where I ended up. I'm really glad that I learned what else was out there because you don't know about all the other departments when you're just starting out. Um, and I will say Kelvin's right. The literary rights course was very good. I took it. It was great. I really enjoyed it. That and the audiobooks, like would recommend. Take those. And that is it for me. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Julia, for sharing your experience and spending a couple of minutes with us, talking about your journey. We will now open up the floor for Q&A. Looks like we've got a few questions that have come in already, but I want to thank our presenters for sharing their insights with us. Okay, so there's a few questions that we've answered via text, which I will read out for the audience later. But for now, the first question is the program for someone who is considering self-publishing? Anyone want
I'll
to?
take that one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. As a self-publisher, you will have to learn to do certain things in pub that are done in traditional publishing. For example, handle editorial and production and whatnot. And our courses will help you understand what goes into producing a book. So even and in self-publishing, you're doing that yourself. So it's doubly important that you know how these things work. So yes, I think it does have a lot of relevance to self-publishers. We don't have any courses that are specifically geared towards self-publishers, but the skills that you picked up in the other courses will stand you in good stead.
Awesome. Next question is from Anita Mazumdar Moscato. Thank you for your question, Anita. And I think we also had someone, Jonathan, said who had the same question as Anita did. It's about networking events in Toronto that are set up other than the meetup at the end of the year. And in terms of networking events with other students and faculty. So I know you said in addition to the virtual networking events, I'll take this opportunity to plug in our virtual publishing networking event that's actually coming up on the 25th. So in about 2 days, it's from 5:30 to 7 Eastern time. And feel free to RSVP to that one.
I think Anita is also talking about other opportunities for
Yeah,
networking as
so
well. So I wanted
yeah,
to.
that's what I'm saying. That's I know about that, but Kelvin, feel free to talk about anything
Yeah,
that.
I mean, we do. I mean, we aside from the end of term meetup and the virtual networking events, there are many other opportunities to network. I mean, there are not. I mean, they're not part of the TMU umbrella, but a lot. There at any given time, there's always going to be like book launches, reading series, and those kind of things. So I would recommend Following publishers on social media and finding out news about when they're having their launches or when they're having their reading series and when they're having events because it's a really good way to meet people. Also, volunteering with organizations like the Writers Trust. That also is very helpful in helping you meet other people who are already in publishing. So, and this is something I tell my students. And this is something I told to, a creative writing class as well. So it's something that I stand by.
Okay, next question is, do you also help with practical aspects of the industry like tools or softwares like InDesign and editing platforms?
Um, if you take the intro to publishing course, sorry, the intro to a book design course, you will have a trials, a trial subscription, I guess, of Adobe Creative Cloud. But generally speaking, no, the Chain School nor the program does not have any student discounts for editing platforms or creative suites.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And Lee and Julia, feel free to jump in on any of the questions if you have something to add. So next one is from Anne Marie Van. Thank you for your question, Anne Marie. Do you think this program would be appropriate for someone who'd like to work in the Quebecois market, but also try to bridge the gap between the Franco and Anglo markets?
Lee?
Yeah, I think it probably would be. I mean, you'd be getting kind of a good foundation of all, like as Julia pointed out, like you get to do kind of a little bit of everything,
Yeah.
which most of the Quebec market is also um, independent, smaller sized houses. So I can see that being a huge advantage, and having some knowledge of how things work over on the English side, I think would only serve you well on the Franco side as well. The principles are the same in publishing. The markets are different, but the underlying principles are the same.
Yeah. The underlying principles and things like editing don't really change. Sales and marketing change depending on the territory, but again, the foundations don't change.
Okay, moving on to the next question from Lily Murray. How important is an English degree in today's publishing industry, and what skills or experiences can realistically substitute for it when trying to get your foot in the door?
Can I start with this one? No, you don't need it. I mean, an English degree is great. I have an English degree, I have a philosophy degree, but I do get a lot of questions from prospective students asking, "Hey, I don't have an English degree. I have a science background. Am I eligible?" I'm like, "Please join us. We love diverse backgrounds in publishing." So I mean, our program is set up for people who have no idea how publishing works. When I joined the program in 2004, 2005, I had just finished working retail. I did not get into grad school. Thank you, U of T. But the program did help me learn how publishing works. So it's designed for people who have zero experience and to give you the skills and experience that you'll need to start your career.
I'll add to that. I also have an English degree, but I agree you do not need one. And I would say that if you're trying to get a job in publishing, having a publishing certificate is or degree is way more important than having an English degree. Like I thought I'd be set with my English degree and I was not. I was like, this doesn't mean anything. So yeah, like I think in terms of like what replaces it, like I think the main thing an English degree communicates is an interest in books and which publishers do want. But if you can communicate that in other ways, that's totally fine. Like as long as you can answer in an interview, like what do you like to read? What have we published that you like? Like what are you interested in? Like as long as you can prove the interest and that you can think like an English major, that's all that matters. You do not need a degree. And also like publishers, I do think are also prioritizing more diverse backgrounds as well and different backgrounds. Like they don't want just 200 people with English degrees. That would be boring. Like you don't want copy
No,
paste. So
you're
it's good to have like a different background. You could absolutely bring that into a career as well.
Yeah, I know just to add to that, we have someone who's saying they have a Master's of Criminology and Social Justice degree and is also a graphic designer. and an upcoming indie novelist, would this be helpful planning on either querying or self-publishing? So definitely, like you said, that background is always helpful. So we have an AI question. Are you seeing any impact due to AI on the job market? Uh, Anyone feel free to jump in.
I'm not taking that one. I'm busy typing an answer.
I can say no. I think especially on the independent side, a lot of publishers are. I mean, we kind of view a lot of what we do as craft publishing, I think is maybe a way to put it. And we're really committed to not on the editorial side in particular or the design side using AI tools. If anything, I think people are just using them for rote admin tasks, if at all. But that's actually not affecting jobs.
That's what I
I
was gonna say too. That like I haven't seen any impact on the job market from my perspective. I've again seen it just used for rote admin tasks. Like look, publishers are definitely looking into how to use tools so that just to take some like annoying tasks off their employees' plates for sure. And I do think it's valuable as you're entering the job market to like be aware of that and educate yourself about those tools. I think that definitely gives you a leg up, but no, I don't see an impact on the actual job market or the like
Yeah,
creator landscape.
and in trade, and in trade publishing, a lot of the work that we do is, create, something that is created by humans, and so there is still, people aren't using or encouraging or even condoning the use of AI to replace that creator. That said, though, in educational publishing, it's a very different matter entirely. AI has been used to pretty much automate many tasks in educational publishing to the point where cost centers have been adjusted to allow for it. But that's the main difference really in between how each sector of the industry views AI. Generally speaking, as Lee and Julia said, AI is still very much not part of the regular day to day.
Love that. Thank you for sharing that. Next question, and I think this is the one that we received via email before from Laura Gonzalez. Thank you for your question. It's I've heard several publishing professionals say that the certificate or diploma in publishing isn't required to get a job in the industry. Also, the industry it seems pretty competitive with not many jobs available in Toronto. Why should someone still get this certificate?
I can take this one. I like this question. As somebody who doesn't have a publishing degree, but did get a job. It's true. You don't need it to get a job. Um, at the same time, it's funny. I recently volunteered as a career coach for high schoolers. Super fun. I was on a publishing call with a couple of other professionals who had gone through publishing programs, and it was really interesting hearing their perspective as well, and how they got so much out of it. In large part, like the knowledge piece that we've talked about, but also really the networking and how the people that they met during the course are the people they're still working with today, oftentimes, or are working alongside. And so there's that really essential networking piece. I have a creative writing background, so I came at it from the writing side of things. And that whole networking piece is still true for me from the additional education that I did. Um, Also, what was really interesting is it turned out that 2 out of 3 of us had actually taken breaks from publishing and then come back in. So it was really, we'd gone and done other things and come back. And so just to speak to that lowered the perception of it being competitive, it's kind of not an all or nothing situation either, I don't think, if that helps.
No, I think that's definitely very helpful. Thank you so much for um, sharing that answers. Okay, moving on. We've got them pouring in the questions. So next one is, have you seen any older students age 50 plus making a successful transition into publishing, especially editing?
Wow. No one's in. All right.
I mean, actually, I do know somebody who is older and actually just has started a freelance editing career,
Yeah.
and is actually doing quite well with it. Took some time kind of working alongside somebody else who ended up mentoring them a little bit, in addition to taking some courses. And so anecdotally, yes, actually.
And what is indexing for books? Can you explain that a little bit further, Kelvin? I know during the presentation you did talk about that a little bit. So
Yeah. I mean, you have two editors on the panel. You asked a non-editor to explain indexing. Thank you, Mashroor. Okay, so when you look at a book with an index, there is a whole art and craft dedicated to making the index, which involves, and I have actually never done an index before, nor have I actually taken the course, so I'm kind of like flying by the seat of my pants here. Writing, coming up with an index is tricky because you have to figure out where what the important topics are, what the recurring topics are, and you have to figure out how to lay them out and whatnot. It's quite a difficult task, and you're going to hear, oh, but you can do that in Microsoft Word. But again, you're not going to get something good out of it. The art in indexing is actually really knowing what is to be indexed. Um, you can find some recurring themes, but you also want to look at the book and say, okay, maybe there's something in here that's very important. That's just, it's like, for example, a history book. There's an event that happened once and off, it's a one-off, but it's important enough in certain contexts that I would want to have that in an index. So something like that. It's a real discipline that, again, I know nothing about. So take me with a grain of salt.
anything to add to that from Lee or Julia? We're good.
No, no backup. Okay, cool.
A
You
lot of
nailed it.
questions about other schools and different programs. I think there was one about Simon Fraser,
Yeah.
and another one about yeah, I think two questions about that program. And so maybe we can talk a little bit about what our focus is on and what differentiates us. Oh, I think
So
Centennial was the other one that was mentioned.
So there are four main publishing schools in Canada. We have this program. We have Centennial and Humber, both in Toronto or Ontario, depending on who you talk to about what the GTA is, and also Simon Fraser in BC. Um, so Simon Fraser, it is an MPub, so it is very much an academic publishing program, and you will learn things like editing, but it's not skills training. It is very theoretical. It is, you are getting a master's in it. It's research. A lot of it's research based. Centennial and Humber are both full-time programs. They take place of Lee. You can help me because you teach in Humber. I believe both programs are 2 months long.
Yes, 8 weeks.
And sorry,
I
eight
believe eight
weeks.
weeks. Yeah.
Thank you. But the thing is, they're very much overview based. You will get an overview of the industry and a fast track to the certificate, but you won't pick up the same dive into skills development that we have here. Um, and our program, again, is part-time. So it's not for fast tracking. It's for people, I mean, you can't, like, if you want to fast track and do it really quickly, you can do so. I wouldn't recommend it because it's a lot of work because, again, our courses are much deeper dives into skills training. But you can, like, if you really want to finish the whole program within 1 year, provided the courses that you want are actually being offered at in certain terms. Because again, not every course is offered every term, right?
Okay, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, next question is, what are some skills that you can learn that are transferable to other industries or jobs in the future? So maybe Lee, I don't know if you want to start. I know you
Yeah,
hard
sure.
stop, so you can deck out after that.
Writing, editing, huge skills right now. Especially honestly in the face of AI, being able to write well is, I think, going to become a premium skill going forward. The technological skills, knowing even a little bit of HTML, still helpful, is still going to be helpful. Um, Learning about how all the pieces fit together, I think that's it. Like it's a real whole, like you can get, it's a really robust thing. So kind of everything is transferable, which is a bit of a cop-out answer, but it's true.
Awesome. Okay, that's great to hear. Next question is the French publishing industry very different from the English publishing industry?
Yeah, right, Lee? Yeah, for the
Yeah,
most part.
I mean, we sometimes sell rights back and forth, which is my main interaction with the French publishing industry in Canada.
Yeah,
Um, and there's another vote for Kelvin's rights class. There you go. I came around. Um, and so it's just a different market. Their big market is Quebec and France, and there's sort of different structures as to how things are sold, how things are priced, how things
yeah,
interact with schools, and educational settings, which
yes,
is really good for them. And I wish we had it here.
yeah. Yeah, so what Lee was saying is, this is a very deep dive into a very obscure detail about how books are sold. In English Canada, if you sell a book to a library or an institution, they go through library wholesalers, right? So there is that intermediary between you and the publisher. But in Quebec, all sales are through the publisher. That is right. Like, am I getting that right? Yeah. But yeah. Also, I find that French publishing probably has different challenges than the English language publishing. English language publishing, we do have quite a few, including competition with the United States. So, going to a bookstore and seeing a whole bunch of American books and not that many Canadian books. The French Canadians don't really have that problem. So, for the most part, aside from France.
They do from France. I'm so sorry, but I have to hop off. But
Yeah.
it's been a pleasure talking with you all and everyone
Thank
out
you
there in
so
the
much.
ether.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you very much, Lee.
Thanks for sharing.
Take care. Bye. Yeah.
Okay, so we've got a few more questions
Yeah.
left. I know we're at 6:15. We'll maybe take one more. I'll try to
Yeah.
combine this
I'm
one.
happy. Yeah, I'm happy to stay a bit longer if we need
Okay.
to.
Yeah, perfect.
Julia, you're free. You're free to stay or go if you like. I'd love to have you here. So I'm not doing
I
this
got an
alone.
extra few minutes. I've also been typing answers frantically.
Thank
Yeah,
you. Yeah,
thank
I've
you so
seen it.
much
Thank you so
for doing
much.
that.
You're the best.
Okay, no, so
Um,
next question is if someone wants some career opportunities like in publishing, but they're not in Toronto, what type of opportunities are available for them?
Publishers, there are publishers in in almost every province. Again, I mean, it just so happens that publishing centers around uh, BC and Toronto. It's like Vancouver and Toronto, but there are publishers everywhere. Publishers everywhere. You, I mean, I can't tell you. I don't want to tell you something and have a false promise. So all I can say is keep your eyes and ears open. There are a lot of publishing job sites like the Quill and Choir, and a lot of times they will post jobs from publishers outside of Ontario.
I'll just
That's it. Sorry,
I
go
was
ahead.
going to add to that and say I think there's also a big like distinguisher between like larger corporate publishers that often like have multinational offices and are based in the States versus like independents. Toronto is where you're going to find all the big ones like Harper, Simon Schuster, Penguin Random House. But other provinces definitely, I think there's more smaller independent
Yeah,
publishers based out there, which is also like
yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
for example, if you go onto the Association of Canadian Publishers website, you can probably find, I think they do sort their members list, member publishers list by province. I could be wrong, but go have a look. You'll find that there are really publishers in every province.
Okay.
There's also a lot of remote jobs now, I will say too.
Yeah, yeah.
Does the program explore small press agencies?
I'm not sure what you mean by that. I'm very sorry. But in our core, our overview courses, we do talk about the independence, yes, and quite a number of people are who teach here have worked in independent publishers. Yeah.
Another question from Lily Murray. Thank you for your question. I think it's a great one. If you're new to publishing, how can you get the most out of this program, and what would you recommend doing to break in?
Uh, I'll speak to it briefly and then I'll let Julia because this is more of a Julia question probably. But all I can say is recommend doing the break in, going to events, really keeping your ear to the ground. Publishing is, very much an old school relationship based industry. So I would go meet people because really what like Lee said earlier, some of the best parts of publishing is the people, despite appearances to the contrary here. But it is, being part of the community is very important, and it really does help in terms of getting your foot in the door. If you are able to, and if you're not working right now, maybe find a job as a bookseller, because being a bookseller really does put you in good stead when applying to publishing jobs. And in the courses, engage with your instructors. This is like, when you're in the course, you do have access to someone who is an industry professional. So ask them questions. When I'm in my course, I tell my students, please, please, please ask questions, that aren't related to the material. Ask me anything. If there's something you learned in the module that you want to know more about, ask, because, I am here to do that for you. So, be curious, be interested in stuff, and don't be afraid to ask questions.
Just to answer the part about how to make the most out of the certificate, I said this in my intro, but I would really encourage you to take a course that you wouldn't instinctually go to. Like, even if you think you want to be an editor, don't just take the editing courses. Like, take a bunch of different ones, because you're never gonna know what you end up really liking and like where you're meant to go, I guess. And also, even if you do then be an editor, I think it's very useful to know about the other departments. So I'd say that. And then I agree with Kelvin, like, talk to your instructors. You never know like who's gonna hear about a job or who can help you get in the
Yeah.
door somewhere. So really like make the most of, you're not going to be in an environment surrounded by publishing professionals for very long other than
Yeah.
actually working. So like
Yeah.
while you're in there, make the most of it. And also this is like a very nerdy thing to say, but like really try on the assignments. I don't know. Like a lot of them I found actually very applicable to actual job stuff. And you can put that
Yeah.
on your resume. Like you
Yeah.
can say like I drafted a P&L for this and I know how to
Yeah.
do that. Or like in the audiobooks course, you have to do a lot of audiobook prep work. Like I can like do a cast list and I know how to adapt a manuscript for audio book recording and da 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 da. So just like, yeah, make the most and like actually try on everything. It is helpful.
And
Just for the
Julia, what
record,
was the
Julia
most
was one. Just for the record, Julia is and was one of my best students in my course,
Thank
and
you.
one of my
That's
favorites.
nice.
So
awesome?
there are three questions left, Mashwar. Can we
Yeah.
go through them?
Yeah,
Um,
another one is from Jonathan. What's the most important elective? Maybe we start with that.
Okay, so every one of you who wants to be an editor, because I know 90% of you are coming here to be an editor, take CDPB 102, copy and stylistic editing. It is the core editorial course that opens up the rest of the editorial courses for you. If there's a prerequisite, it's that one for the editing courses. So I will take that. But also, I think there is kind of like a subtle expectation in publishing that everyone can edit, and that core, like at different levels. So, that course will help the most. And it's also kind of the foundational editing courses. So if there was an important elective, it'd be that one. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And then we've got one more from Anna. Thank you for your question again. Currently, I understand one can create a digital book instantly via Kindle. However, I want to know if the rights are protected if a book is self-published in this way.
That is not a question about, the publishing program, but I will attempt to answer it anyways, based on my limited knowledge of digital production. If you want to talk about, rights are protected in the sense of putting a digital lock on a book, it's a toggle that you have to toggle yourself in InDesign or Adobe, um, and if you're publishing it via Kindle, I believe there are locks, there are toggles for territories as well as where the book is sold. If you want to talk about the more intangible copyright, then yes, as the author, you do have copyright to the book. The copyright is yours. We talk a lot about rights this, rights that as as intellectual property, but in the end, as the creator, the copyright is yours unless you are working on a work for a hire project where you are paid by a company to write something that ends up being the property of the company. But that's stated in letters of agreement. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, well, no more open questions. I know we're over time, so thank you. I really appreciate you both staying on longer to help answer the questions. And thank you to all of our attendees for a really great conversation and all the great questions. If you're interested in the certificate, please go to our website at continuing.torontomu.ca. Open enrollment is currently down right now, but it will be back up early morning tomorrow at 1:15 a.m. So we apologize for any inconvenience. But other than that, if you have any other questions, you can email me directly at mash.chaudhry@torontomu.ca or the publishing email at publish@torontomu.ca.
And
And
if you
yeah.
have any questions, yeah, sorry, Mr. I was gonna say if you have any questions, we'd love to hear from you. Yeah.
Exactly. And yeah, so you will receive a recording of this session in an email with a survey. And yeah, do reach out if there are any questions on behalf of the Chang School and all of our panelists and speakers today. Thank you, and have a great rest of the day.
Take care.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye.